When someone repeatedly makes excuses instead of taking responsibility, it's a red flag that is easy to overlook but deeply corrosive. At first, it might seem harmless, just a bad day, a miscommunication, or circumstances outside their control. But when this behavior becomes a pattern, it reveals something much more significant: a refusal to be accountable, to confront one's flaws, or to grow from failure. Repeated excuses are not just signs of immaturity, they are barriers to transformation. Excuses act as a psychological defense mechanism. When a person fails and immediately blames something or someone else, they're shielding themselves from the pain of self-awareness. It might feel protective in the moment, but it creates a warped view of reality over time. If nothing is ever their fault, then nothing needs to change. That person remains fixed in place, untouched by consequence, unable to adapt. This kind of stagnation isn't just frustrating for those around them, it's dangerous. People who refuse accountability develop a victim mindset, and those who see themselves as perpetual victims can justify nearly any behavior because they always believe they're reacting, never initiating harm. This lack of accountability shows up in many subtle forms. Someone might show up late and say traffic was bad every time. They might deliver poor work and say the instructions weren't clear. They forget something important and claim they've been overwhelmed. Life is indeed complex, and people make mistakes, but when every failure is met with a reason, and never with ownership, when apologies are always coupled with explanations and never with reflection, you are witnessing a deeper flaw. It's not about what happened, it's about the refusal to examine why it keeps happening. Another layer to this red flag is how it impacts relationships. When someone won't take responsibility, the burden falls on others to adapt. Partners begin walking on eggshells, colleagues pick up the slack, friends become therapists, the dynamic shifts from equal partnership to quiet resentment. Accountability is the foundation of trust. When it's absent, the structure collapses. You cannot build a life with someone who consistently externalizes blame, because you will end up carrying their share of the emotional labor, and eventually yours too. What makes this red flag particularly dangerous is that it's often masked by charm or intellect. Some people are very good at rationalizing their behavior, weaving convincing narratives that deflect blame while still sounding reasonable. But the truth lies in consistency. If someone always has a narrative that excuses them from fault, even if they speak eloquently, their words are hollow. True accountability is marked by change, not by explanation. In the end, the person who always makes excuses is telling you something important. They are not ready to grow. They are not prepared to confront the discomfort that precedes transformation. And if you continue to excuse their excuses, you will be complicit in your own erosion. There's a subtle form of disrespect that often goes unnoticed, cleverly disguised as humor. It's the comment wrapped in sarcasm or the joke that cuts a little too deep. It's the kind of humor that lands with a sting, but is quickly dismissed as just that, a joke. And while everyone tells jokes, and humor is often a healthy part of human interaction, there's a line that some people cross when they use humor to mask disrespect or to lower someone else's sense of self-worth. These jokes aren't funny, they're harmful, and they signal something much more toxic than a desire to entertain. The person who uses humor in this way often does so with the claim that it's all in good fun. After all, who can be offended by something that's supposed to make everyone laugh? But beneath the veil of lightheartedness lies something darker. A deliberate attempt to diminish, belittle, or ridicule another person. This is a form of emotional manipulation, and it is often brushed off as harmless, especially when the person delivering the joke has a charming or witty personality. The problem is that these comments aren't accidental, they're purposeful. They're a way of exerting control, reinforcing power dynamics, or revealing a deeper disdain, all while wearing the cloak of humor. What makes this kind of disrespect so dangerous is its insidious nature. It's not overt, it's not a direct insult. The person making the joke doesn't call you names or say something obviously hurtful. Instead, They use humor to make you feel small, to make you question yourself, and to plant seeds of self-doubt. The joke might highlight a flaw, a mistake, or an insecurity, and while it's framed in laughter, the impact is anything but lighthearted. Over time, these comments accumulate, and they start to take a toll on your confidence and self-esteem. What's even more concerning is the dynamic that often emerges. The person delivering these jokes plays on the fact that humor is a socially acceptable way of saying things that might otherwise be considered rude or inappropriate. If you get upset or call out the comment, they can always backtrack and claim it was just a joke, accusing you of lacking a sense of humor. It creates a trap where the victim is left feeling as though they're overreacting, gaslighting them into questioning their own feelings. This manipulation ensures that the person delivering the disrespect is never truly held accountable for their actions. This behavior often occurs in settings where there's an underlying imbalance of power, whether in relationships, workplaces, or social groups. The person who uses humor to demean others often holds some kind of social or emotional leverage over the target, making it difficult for them to push back without fear of retaliation or exclusion. It's an insidious tactic because it forces the target to accept mistreatment under the guise of social bonding. The supposed lightness of the joke masks its true weight. The long-term effects of this kind of disrespect can be profound. Even if the target of the humor doesn't react immediately, these comments can erode their trust in others and create an atmosphere of tension and insecurity. They may start second, guessing their worth or doubting their abilities, unable to shake off the sting of those jokes. The cumulative damage to someone's self-esteem and sense of belonging is not something that can be easily repaired with a laugh or an apology. Disrespect disguised as jokes is a dangerous game. It wears down relationships and builds walls where trust and mutual respect should exist. While humor can bring people closer, this kind of humor only serves to divide and destroy. And as with all forms of subtle disrespect, it's crucial to recognize it for what it is and refuse to let it slide. A joke at someone else's expense is never inconsistency between words and actions is one of the clearest and most telling red flags in any human interaction. It reveals not just a lapse in communication, but a deeper fracture in integrity and character. People may speak with conviction, promising change, loyalty, or commitment, but if those promises are not backed by consistent behavior, their words become meaningless. The truth of a person's character is found not in what they say when it's convenient, but in what they do when no one is watching or when it costs them something. When actions contradict words, it's not just a mistake, it's a signal that something is fundamentally misaligned. This red flag is often easy to miss at first because people tend to take others at their word, especially when emotions are involved. When someone tells you they care, you want to believe them. When they promise they'll do better, you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. But repeated inconsistencies between what someone says and what they actually do erode that trust, slowly and painfully. It starts with small things, promises to call that never come, commitments that are quietly abandoned, apologies that sound sincere but are never followed by change. Over time, these inconsistencies add up, and the result is a relationship, whether romantic, professional, or platonic, that is built on unstable ground. One of the more dangerous aspects of this pattern is the emotional confusion it creates. The inconsistency leads to internal conflict. You hear one thing, but you see another. This creates cognitive dissonance, a psychological state where two opposing realities are forced to coexist. You begin to question your judgment. You start to rationalize the gaps between words and actions. You might think maybe they meant well, or they're just going through a tough time. But the pattern remains, and with each cycle, your ability to trust your instincts weakens. That erosion of self-trust is one of the most damaging consequences of being around someone whose actions don't match their words. Moreover, inconsistency is often a strategy, whether conscious or not. It keeps others off balance. If a person is warm and loving one moment but distant and unreliable the next, it creates a cycle of hope and disappointment, that can be emotionally destabilizing. This unpredictability fosters dependence, where the other person is constantly seeking the moment of congruence, the time when words and actions finally align, but often that moment never fully arrives. Instead, it's dangled like a carrot, just enough to keep someone engaged, but not enough to build anything real or lasting. The reality is that consistency is not about perfection. Everyone fails to meet their own standards at times. But there is a vast difference between a person who stumbles while trying to do better and a person who uses words to create a false reality. The former is human, the latter is deceptive. A consistent person will admit when they fall short and take visible steps to align their actions with their values. An inconsistent person will continue to craft a narrative that serves their image, regardless of how many times their behavior betrays it. Words are easy. They cost nothing, but actions require effort, integrity, and self-awareness. If someone's actions fail to support their words, believe the actions. That is where the truth resides. Emotional blackmail framed as loyalty is one of the most manipulative and misleading behaviors a person can encounter, often wrapped in the language of care, connection, or sacrifice. It disguises control and guilt as love and devotion, making it extremely difficult to identify and even harder to resist. At its core, emotional blackmail leverages a person's natural desire to be loyal, to show love, and to maintain peace, twisting those instincts into tools of manipulation. When someone says, "If you really cared about me, you would," or "After everything I've done for you, how could you?" they are not appealing to mutual respect or shared values. They are applying pressure, using guilt and obligation as a form of leverage to control your behavior. This kind of manipulation operates through emotional debt. The manipulator keeps a mental ledger of all the things they've done for you, the favors, the sacrifices, the emotional labor. But instead of offering these things freely, as a gift from one person to another, they store them away like currency, waiting for the moment they can demand repayment. The repayment isn't always financial or tangible. It's often psychological, unquestioning loyalty, silence in the face of mistreatment, or compliance with their demands. What makes this so dangerous is that it masquerades as closeness. The manipulator may insist that they're just trying to protect the relationship, that they want what's best for both of you, or that they're acting this way out of love. But real loyalty is freely chosen. It is not coerced through guilt, fear, or obligation. This pattern is particularly difficult to escape because it often comes from someone close. A partner, a parent, a friend, or a mentor. Someone whose approval matters deeply. The emotional blackmailer preys on that attachment, using it as both weapon and shield. They imply that to disagree, to assert a boundary, or to act independently is to betray them. And because you don't want to hurt them, because you care, you begin to censor, to comply, to suppress your own needs for the sake of keeping the peace. Over time, this creates a one-sided dynamic where one person's feelings, expectations, and needs dominate the relationship, while the others are diminished, ignored, or punished when expressed. The tactics of emotional blackmail are often subtle. The manipulator doesn't always scream or issue ultimatums. Sometimes it's a sigh, a disappointed look, a withdrawn presence. The message is always the same. Your choices are causing harm, and it's your responsibility to fix it by doing what they want. This fosters deep confusion. You begin to question whether you're being selfish for asserting your needs or boundaries. You may start to believe that your independence is a threat to the relationship, and that the only way to preserve harmony is through constant self-sacrifice. But real loyalty cannot be extracted under pressure. It grows from mutual respect, shared effort, and a willingness to allow each person the freedom to choose. When loyalty is demanded rather than earned, when it is measured by your willingness to surrender yourself to someone else's expectations, it ceases to be loyalty at all. It becomes a tool of control, a mechanism for silencing dissent and enforcing conformity. all while claiming the moral high ground of love and devotion. Chronic victimhood is a deeply ingrained mindset where a person consistently positions themselves as the one who is always wronged, misunderstood, or mistreated, regardless of the circumstances. It goes beyond a single instance of being hurt or facing adversity. It becomes a defining narrative, a lens through which every interaction and experience is filtered. This is not to say that the person has never been hurt. Often, people who adopt this mindset have experienced real pain. But rather than processing that pain and growing from it, they hold on to it, using it as a shield against responsibility and a weapon to manipulate those around them. A person who adopts chronic victimhood does not seek resolution. They seek validation for their suffering. Every story they tell casts them in the same role: the innocent one, the misunderstood one, the one who was betrayed or taken advantage of. It's a script that rarely changes, even when the settings or people do. They might change jobs, relationships, or social circles, yet the story remains the same. Someone else is always to blame. This pattern becomes not just a coping mechanism, but a core identity. And the danger lies in how that identity resists accountability, growth, or healing. This mindset often attracts a certain kind of sympathy at first. Others may feel compelled to help, to offer support, or to act as protectors. But over time, the exhaustion sets in. The chronic victim drains the emotional energy of those around them. Any attempt to provide constructive feedback or encourage self-reflection is met with defensiveness, or worse, accusations of insensitivity. They interpret challenge as attack and suggestion as betrayal. Because if they are not the victim, they might have to consider the possibility that they played a role in their own suffering, and that idea is intolerable to them. In relationships, this dynamic creates an imbalanced power structure. The chronic victim becomes the emotional center, and everyone else is pulled into orbit around their perceived suffering. It can become a form of manipulation, where guilt is used to control and compliance is expected in return for emotional peace. If someone sets a boundary, they are accused of being cold or abandoning the victim. If someone makes a mistake, it becomes another chapter in the never-ending narrative of mistreatment. The chronic victim does not forgive easily, because forgiveness would mean letting go of the narrative that gives them power. What makes chronic victimhood particularly toxic is that it masquerades as vulnerability. It can look like openness, honesty, or emotional depth, but it lacks the crucial component of self-responsibility. Vulnerability invites connection and healing. Chronic victimhood demands loyalty and submission. It stunts personal development because it removes the individual from the driver's seat of their own life. When someone is always the victim, they surrender the ability to change, to influence outcomes, or to make better choices. And without that agency, growth becomes impossible. Chronic victimhood is not just a personal issue. It's relational, emotional, and even moral. It erodes trust, limits potential, and creates an atmosphere where truth is distorted to maintain a narrative. The longer it goes unchallenged, the more deeply it becomes rooted in identity, making real connection and accountability nearly impossible. Your own gut feeling that something is off is one of the most primal, reliable warning systems you possess, and yet it is also one of the most frequently ignored. It doesn't always come with a clear explanation or logical reasoning. It might just be a subtle unease, a flicker of discomfort in a conversation, or a quiet tension in your chest that seems to arise without cause. But that feeling, that instinctive, almost biological signal, is your body and subconscious mind working together to alert you before your conscious mind catches up. It is often the result of countless subtle cues being picked up, patterns recognized, and emotional memory triggered, all below the level of your immediate awareness. Many people dismiss their gut feelings because they want to be polite, fair, or rational. We are taught to give others the benefit of the doubt, to not judge too quickly, to be understanding and open-minded. And while these values are important, they can also lead us to override our own inner alarm system. That's when we start justifying what we feel. We say things like, maybe I'm overreacting, or they didn't mean it that way, or I'm probably just being too sensitive. But intuition doesn't speak in excuses or overanalysis. It speaks in signals. And when you train yourself to ignore those signals, you lose one of the most essential tools for self-protection and clarity. The gut doesn't always explain why something feels wrong. That's what makes it so easy to overlook. Maybe someone says all the right things, but their tone doesn't match. Maybe a situation looks good on paper, but you can't shake the feeling that you're being misled. Maybe everyone else seems comfortable, but something in you feels on edge. These moments are not irrational. They are invitations to pause, observe, and ask deeper questions. Too often, people only realize their gut was right in hindsight, when the consequences of ignoring it become impossible to deny. They say things like, I knew something felt wrong, or I should have trusted my instincts. That regret is one of the heaviest because it's not about what happened. It's about what you saw coming and still chose not to act on. This internal signal is especially important in situations involving manipulation, dishonesty, or danger, where the threat isn't always visible. Manipulative people are often charming. Toxic situations can be dressed up as opportunities. Harm can wear the mask of kindness. Your gut can often detect these inconsistencies before your conscious mind has enough data to piece them together. It's not magic, it's deep intelligence. It's your nervous system reacting to tone, body language, patterns, and emotional history that your rational mind hasn't yet processed. Learning to trust that feeling doesn't mean acting impulsively or judging unfairly. It means learning to pay attention, to investigate further, to pause rather than override. The gut doesn't guarantee immediate clarity, but it does offer direction. Ignoring it out of politeness, fear, or doubt often leads to choices that violate your own boundaries or leave you vulnerable to harm. Listening to your gut is an act of self-respect. It's you choosing to trust that your inner voice has value, even when the outside world tells you to silence it.